penny and an off-center 1909 wheat penny that could have collectors searching their change all over again. Stay until the end. The next coin might be the treasure you've been looking for. First up is the 1943 Abraham Lincoln wheat 1 cent, a fascinating wartime coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but can become much more interesting when collectors carefully examine its surfaces and production characteristics. The example we're looking at today has a clearly recognizable 1943 date, no visible mint mark, unusual lamination damage, and a dark, rusty appearance across the reverse. To an inexperienced eye, this may simply look like an old penny that spent decades in poor conditions. But experienced collectors know that unusual damage and possible mint-made errors deserve a much closer inspection before the coin is dismissed. The 1943 Lincoln cent was created during one of the most important periods in American history. The United States was deeply involved in World War II, and materials such as copper were needed for military production. Because of this demand, the United States Mint made a dramatic change to the 1 cent coin. Instead of the traditional bronze composition, the regular 1943 cent was struck using zinc-coated steel planchets.
This decision created the famous 1943 steel cent, a coin that immediately stood apart from the copper cents produced before and after the war. The obverse of the coin features Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his portrait is the familiar inscription, "In God We Trust," while Liberty appears to the left and the date 1943 appears on the right. Beneath the date, there is no mint mark on this example. That absence is important because cents produced at the Philadelphia Mint did not carry a mint mark. Therefore, a 1943 cent without a mint mark is normally identified as a Philadelphia issue rather than automatically being considered an error. The reverse displays the classic wheat cent design created by Victor David Brenner. 2 wheat stalks frame the central denomination 1 cent, with United States of America across the middle and E pluribus unum above. This famous reverse had been used since 1909 and remained on the Lincoln cent until 1958. The design has become one of the most recognizable images in American coin collecting, and even heavily worn examples continue to attract collectors because they represent an important period in United States history. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 684.6 million 1943 steel cents, which means that the normal Philadelphia issue is not considered rare simply because of its date. Millions of these coins entered circulation during the war, and many survived. However, collectors understand that a large mintage does not mean every individual coin is common. Certain errors, unusual planche problems, dramatic strikes, and exceptional condition examples can become much more desirable than ordinary pieces. That brings us to the most interesting feature of this particular example: the reported lamination damage. A genuine lamination error is different from a normal scratch or environmental damage. It can occur when there is a problem within the metal used to create the planche. During striking or afterward, part of the affected metal may separate or peel away. If the feature can be confirmed as a genuine mint-made lamination error, collectors may consider it much more significant than ordinary damage. The rusty appearance on the reverse also tells an important story about the 1943 steel cent. Because these coins were made with a steel core covered by zinc, damage to the protective coating could allow moisture and environmental conditions to affect the underlying metal. Over many decades, some examples developed dark surfaces, discoloration, corrosion, and rust. This is why a 1943 steel cent found today can look completely different from the bright silver-colored appearance it had when it first entered circulation. However, collectors should remember that rust itself is not a valuable error. Heavy corrosion usually hurts the appearance and market value of a coin. The real question is whether the unusual area on the reverse is actually a mint-made lamination, or simply the result of environmental damage. This distinction can make a major difference in the value of the coin. Collectors examining a coin like this would normally look at the date, lettering, rim, surfaces, and damaged area under magnification. They may also check its weight and magnetic response because the normal 1943 steel cent has specific physical characteristics. If the coin has an unusual composition, unexpected weight, or other strange feature, professional authentication becomes even more important. Another reason the 1943 date receives so much attention is because of the famous 1943 copper cent. During the transition to steel, a small number of leftover bronze planchets were accidentally struck with the 1943 design. Genuine 1943 bronze cents are extremely rare and have become some of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. But this does not mean every unusual 1943 cent is a copper rarity. A normal steel cent with rust, scratches, or lamination damage remains a completely different coin. This is where many new collectors make a mistake. They see an unusual 1943 penny and immediately think it must be one of the famous rare errors. In reality, most 1943 cents are ordinary steel pieces, and many unusual-looking examples simply experienced decades of circulation and poor storage. The safest approach is always to investigate first and assign a value second. For our featured example, the combination of a Philadelphia 1943 date, no mint mark, reported lamination damage, and heavily rusty reverse gives the coin an interesting collector story. If the lamination feature were professionally authenticated as a genuine mint-made error, the coin could attract attention from specialists who collect Lincoln cent errors and wartime coinage. If the feature were determined to be ordinary environmental damage, however, the value would be considerably lower. Condition is also an important part of the story. The heavy dirt and rusty appearance described on this coin would normally prevent it from competing with high-grade 1943 steel cents. Collectors generally prefer original, stable surfaces and strong detail. A damaged coin can still be collectible, especially when it contains a genuine rare error, but the error must be strong enough to overcome the disadvantages created by poor preservation. The market for Lincoln wheat cents remains strong because these coins appeal to both beginners and experienced collectors. Early Lincoln cents are often passed down through families, discovered in old collections, or found inside boxes of inherited coins. The possibility that a seemingly ordinary penny could contain a rare mint error keeps collectors searching through these coins decades after they were removed from everyday circulation. If this particular 1943 cent were confirmed to have a significant and unusual mint-made lamination error, its value could move far beyond that of an ordinary circulated steel cent. For the exceptional scenario described here, we can place a hypothetical high-end collector value around $42,500. This is not the normal value of a rusty 1943 Philadelphia cent and should not be treated as a guaranteed auction price. The actual market value would depend on professional authentication, the severity and authenticity of the lamination error, the coin's condition, certification, and the level of interest from collectors at the time of sale. That is what makes this coin so interesting. The date itself is not enough to make it rare. The absence of a mint mark is normal for Philadelphia. The rusty surface does not automatically add value. Instead, the possible mint-made lamination error is the feature that could potentially transform this ordinary-looking wartime penny into a much more desirable collectible. If you have a 1943 steel cent at home, take a close look before putting it back into a coin jar. Check both sides carefully, examine the date and surfaces under magnification, and pay particular attention to unusual areas where the metal appears to separate or peel. Most importantly, never clean, polish, scrape, or chemically treat the coin. Even an unattractive old penny can contain evidence that collectors and professional graders need to see. The 1943 Lincoln steel cent is already an important piece of American history because it represents the nation's effort to conserve materials during World War II. But when a coin from this historic year also shows a genuine mint-made error, its story becomes even more fascinating. What looks like a rusty old penny could potentially be hiding a manufacturing mistake that happened more than 80 years ago, and that possibility is exactly why collectors continue to examine every unusual Lincoln wheat cent they encounter. Next up, let's take a closer look at a fascinating Lincoln wheat cent that often catches the attention of collectors searching through old jars, estate collections, and inherited coin albums. The 1944 Lincoln wheat penny with an S mint mark has become one of the most talked about coins in American numismatics. While millions were struck at the San Francisco Mint, Certain authenticated mint errors, unusual dye varieties, and exceptional high-grade survivors have sold for remarkable prices. At the same time, collectors should remember that ordinary circulation damage, scratches, or post-mint alterations usually reduce a coin's value rather than increase it. Knowing the difference between genuine mint-made characteristics and later damage is what separates an experienced collector from someone simply guessing. The year 1944 marked an important turning point in American history. World War II was still underway, and the United States was producing enormous quantities of military equipment. Copper was once again available for cent production after the steel cent experiment of 1943. As a result, the U.S. Mint returned to a bronze alloy made largely from recycled wartime shell casings, giving the 1944 Lincoln wheat cent its familiar reddish-brown appearance when newly struck. Over the decades, many of these coins toned naturally into chocolate brown, dark brown, or nearly black, depending on how they were stored and circulated. The San Francisco Mint produced hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents during 1944 to meet the nation's need for small change. Even though the overall mintage was high, collectors continue searching because not every coin is the same. Differences in strike quality, die condition, planchet quality, and genuine mint errors can dramatically influence desirability. A sharply struck example with original surfaces and minimal wear is far more desirable than an ordinary circulated piece. When examining a 1944 Lincoln wheat cent, collectors first look at the obverse. Abraham Lincoln's portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner, should display crisp facial details on well-preserved examples. The words, "In God We Trust," curve along the upper rim, while Liberty appears to Lincoln's left. The date, 1944, sits to the right, with the small S mint mark below it. The reverse features two wheat ears framing the denomination 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum above. This classic wheat cent design remained in use until 1958 and continues to be one of America's most beloved coin designs. Collectors pay close attention to the mint mark because it identifies where the coin was struck. The San Francisco Mint has long been associated with producing coins that are especially popular among collectors. While the mint mark alone does not make a coin rare, it helps identify specific varieties and production characteristics unique to that facility. Many people confuse circulation damage with mint errors. A damage date caused by years of wear, corrosion, or environmental exposure is generally considered post-mint damage and does not increase value. However, genuine mint errors occur during the manufacturing process. Examples include off-center strikes, die cracks, debreaks, clipped planchets, lamination errors, struck-through errors, and dramatic die cuts. These authentic mint errors are documented by specialists and can attract significant collector interest when professionally authenticated. Authentication is critical because the rarest and most valuable Lincoln cents are frequently altered or counterfeited. Professional grading companies carefully examine the metal composition, strike characteristics, weight, dimensions, mint mark placement, and microscopic details before assigning a grade and confirming whether a coin is genuine. A certified example gives collectors much greater confidence when bidding at auction. Color also plays a major role in value. Lincoln cents are generally classified as red, red-brown, or brown. A coin that has retained most of its original mint red color after many decades is often worth substantially more than a fully brown example of the same grade. Dark brown coins can still be valuable if they have strong detail, attractive surfaces, and an important authenticated mint error. Condition is equally important. Heavy circulation usually smooths Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and coat. On the reverse, the wheat ears begin losing their fine lines. Collectors use grading standards ranging from good to mint state to describe preservation. The highest grade coins with sharp details, original luster, and minimal marks consistently command the strongest prices. Auction records demonstrate how dramatically value can increase when rarity and condition come together. An ordinary circulated 1944 wheat cent may be worth only a modest amount, while a certified high-grade example with a significant documented mint error or an extremely rare variety can realize thousands or even substantially more in competitive bidding. Exceptional coins with famous pedigrees or extraordinary rarity can achieve remarkable prices, but such results are reserved for genuinely scarce and authenticated examples rather than coins with ordinary wear or damage. Collectors also study die varieties produced as dies gradually wore out. Small differences in lettering, spacing, polishing lines, or die cracks help specialists identify individual die pairs. These subtle characteristics add another layer of excitement because they allow collectors to trace how specific dies change throughout production. Searching for Lincoln wheat cents remains popular because discoveries still happen. Estate collections, old bankrolls, inherited coin albums, and forgotten jars occasionally reveal coins that have not been examined for decades. While most finds are common, every collector hopes to uncover an overlooked variety or authenticated mint error that others missed. Patience is one of the most valuable skills in coin collecting. Experienced collectors inspect every coin under proper lighting, using magnification rather than making quick assumptions. Even when a coin appears unusual, careful research and professional authentication are essential before assigning a premium value. The 1944 Lincoln wheat cent continues to capture the imagination of collectors because it represents American history, classic coin design, and the possibility of discovering something truly special. Whether you're building a complete wheat cent collection or simply checking old pocket change, every coin tells a story. Understanding the difference between ordinary circulation damage and genuine mint-made errors can make all the difference, and that knowledge is what keeps collectors searching year after year for the next remarkable find. Next up is the 1909 SVDB, Abraham Lincoln. Wheat 1 cent. One of the most famous and desirable coins ever produced in the Lincoln cent series. This coin comes from the very first year of the Lincoln wheat cent, making it historically important before we even consider its rarity. The example we're looking at today is described as having a rare off-center strike, the famous S mint mark, and the VDB initials on the reverse. If these features are genuine and professionally authenticated, this could be an especially interesting coin for collectors who specialize in early Lincoln cents and mint errors. The Lincoln cent was introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was a major moment in American coinage because Lincoln became the first real historical person to appear on a regular United States circulating coin. The design was created by Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of Lincoln would become one of the most recognizable images in American numismatic history. The new cent immediately attracted attention from the public and collectors, and the series eventually became one of the most widely collected coin series in the United States. The obverse features Lincoln facing to the right. Above his portrait is the famous inscription, "In God We Trust," while Liberty appears to the left and the date 1909 appears below the portrait area. On this example, the S Mint mark beneath the date identifies the San Francisco Mint. That small letter is extremely important because the 1909 SVDB is one of the key dates of the entire Lincoln wheat cent series. The reverse carries the classic wheat design. Two wheat ears frame the words 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. Near the bottom of the reverse are the initials VDB, representing the designer Victor David Brenner. These three letters became one of the most important details in the history of the Lincoln cent because they were quickly criticized as being too prominent on the new coin. The mint eventually removed the VDB initials from the reverse. But before the change took place, a limited number of cents were struck at the San Francisco Mint with the initials. Only 484,000 1909 SVDB cents were produced. Compared with the enormous production numbers of many other Lincoln cents, this is a remarkably small mintage. That limited supply helped turn the 1909 SVDB into one of the most sought-after coins in the series. For more than a century, collectors have searched for these coins in old collections, coin albums, estate holdings, and inherited groups of pennies. Many examples were heavily circulated before collectors recognized their importance, while others were saved because of their unusual status. Today, the 1909 SVDB remains a major target for anyone building a serious Lincoln cent collection. What makes the example we're discussing even more interesting is the reported off-center strike. An off-center error occurs when the blank planche is not positioned correctly between the dies when the coin is struck. Instead of producing a perfectly centered design, the strike leaves part of the design shifted toward one side. This can create a visible area of blank metal and cause part of the rim or design to disappear from the opposite side. Not every off-center strike has the same value. Collectors examine how far the design is displaced, whether the date remains visible, whether the mint mark can still be identified, and whether important design details survive. A dramatic error that still preserves the date, S mint mark, and VDB initials can be especially attractive because collectors can immediately identify the rare coin even without seeing every part of the original design. That is particularly important for a 1909 SVDB, because authentication is one of the biggest concerns surrounding this famous issue. The coin is valuable enough that altered and counterfeit examples have appeared in the marketplace. Collectors therefore carefully examine the date, mint mark, reverse initials, surfaces, lettering, and overall appearance. Professional certification can provide much greater confidence that the coin is genuine and that the unusual strike occurred at the mint rather than being created later. The famous VDB initials are located at the bottom of the reverse beneath the central design. On a genuine 1909 SVDB, these initials connect the coin to the short production period before the mint removed them. Their presence, combined with the San Francisco mint mark and 1909 date, is what gives this coin its legendary identity. The description of a large date should also be treated carefully. While a particular 1909 SVDB may appear to have a larger-looking date because of its strike, wear, or comparison with another coin, the coin's primary recognized rarity comes from the 1909 SVDB issue itself. Collectors should not assume that every coin described as a large date represents a separate major variety without professional attribution. Condition can have a major effect on the market value of a 1909 SVDB. A heavily circulated example can still be extremely desirable because the date and VDB variety are so important. However, coins with sharper details, original surfaces, attractive color, and fewer distracting marks can bring much stronger prices. At the highest levels, collectors compete aggressively for exceptional examples because only a limited number can survive in truly outstanding condition. The off-center error could add another layer of collector interest. Error. Collectors often look for dramatic mint-made mistakes that are easy to see and difficult to duplicate. When a rare key-date coin also carries a genuine striking error, the combination can create a much more unusual collectible than either feature alone. The strength of that premium depends on the exact error, its percentage of displacement, the preservation of the coin, and whether the error has been recognized by a respected grading service. The historical importance of this cent also adds to its appeal. Imagine this coin entering circulation in 1909, when Americans were seeing Abraham Lincoln's portrait on a circulating coin for the first time. The United States was entering a new century of technology, industry, and social change, while the Lincoln cent itself was beginning what would become one of the longest-running coin series in American history. More than 100 years later, the coin has become a connection to that period. Collectors are not simply buying a penny when they purchase a 1909 SVDB. They are acquiring a small piece of the beginning of the Lincoln cent story, a coin connected to Victor David Brenner, Abraham Lincoln, the San Francisco Mint, and one of the most famous design controversies in American coinage. For the exceptional example described in this video, with a genuine off-center strike, confirmed 1909 SVDB attribution, and strong collector demand, a hypothetical high-end collector value could reach around $48,000. This figure represents an exceptional scenario rather than a guaranteed price for every 1909 SVDB. The actual value would depend on the coin's grade, color, surface quality, authenticity, degree of off-center striking, certification, and competition among bidders. That distinction is important because ordinary examples of the 1909 SVDB can have very different values depending on their condition. A coin with heavy wear, damage, cleaning, or questionable authenticity should never be valued simply by looking at a headline price for a spectacular auction specimen. In the coin market, small differences in quality can sometimes create very large differences in price. If you believe you have a 1909 SVDB in your collection, examine the coin carefully before doing anything to its surface. Look for the 1909 date, the S mint mark beneath the date, and the VDB initials on the reverse. If the coin also appears to be off-center, photograph both sides and have it evaluated by a professional. Never clean or polish it, because original surfaces can be extremely important to collectors and grading services. The 1909 SVDB remains one of the most exciting Lincoln wheat cents to search for because its rarity was created right at the beginning of the series. Add a genuine off-center strike, and the coin becomes even more unusual. What began as a 1-cent piece produced more than a century ago could today attract serious attention from collectors looking for historic key dates and remarkable mint errors. And that is why old Lincoln wheat cents deserve a second look. The difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary collectible may be hidden in a tiny mint mark, a few letters on the reverse, or an unusual strike that happened in a fraction of a second inside the United States Mint. For collectors, that mystery is what makes searching through old coins so exciting. Next up, let's take a closer look at the 1964 D Abraham Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that many Americans have handled without giving it a second thought. Millions of these pennies passed through cash registers, piggy banks, and family coin jars during the 1960s, making them one of the most familiar coins in United States history. Because they are so common in circulation, most people assume every 1964 D Lincoln cent is worth only 1 cent. However, seasoned collectors know that a tiny number of extraordinary examples and authenticated mint error coins have sold for dramatically higher prices than ordinary pieces. The 1964 D Lincoln cent was struck at the Denver Mint during a period when the United States Mint was working at full capacity to meet the nation's growing demand for circulating coinage. These cents were produced using a bronze composition of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% consisting of tin and zinc. Each coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter. While these specifications were standard for the era, the quality of individual strikes could vary depending on the condition of the dies and the speed of production. On the obverse, the coin features the timeless portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head appears the national motto, "In God We Trust." The word liberty is positioned to the left of the portrait, while the date 1964 is located on the right side. Directly beneath the date is the small D mint mark, identifying the coin as having been struck at the Denver Mint. Although the mint mark is small, it is an important detail because collectors often separate Lincoln cents by their mint of origin when building complete sets. The reverse displays the classic wheat ears design only through 1958, so by 1964, the coin instead carries the Lincoln Memorial reverse, designed by Frank Gasparo. The Lincoln Memorial stands proudly in the center, with United States of America across the top and 1 cent prominently below. The motto E pluribus unum appears above the memorial, completing one of the most recognizable reverse designs in modern American coinage. The Denver Mint produced well over 2 billion Lincoln cents in 1964, making this one of the highest mintage issues of the series. Because of this enormous production, ordinary circulated examples remain extremely common today. Nevertheless, high-grade coins with blazing original red surfaces, razor-sharp strikes, and virtually no contact marks become much more difficult to locate. Competition among registry set collectors has pushed prices for the finest certified examples much higher than most people would expect. Collectors also search carefully for genuine mint errors and die varieties on 1964 D Lincoln cents. While a normal coin carries only modest value, authenticated examples with dramatic off-center strikes, broad strikes, major die breaks, clipped planchets, retained cuds, or significant die cracks can attract substantial attention whenever they appear at public auction. Repunched mint marks are not possible for 1964 D Lincoln cents because the mint mark was still punched into the working die by hand during this period, making certain verified varieties especially desirable to specialists. Some collectors refer to large date and small date differences on other Lincoln cent years, But for 1964, it is essential to rely on recognized and authenticated varieties rather than internet myths. Professional grading services carefully examine each coin to determine whether any unusual characteristics were created during the minting process or resulted from damage after the coin entered circulation. This distinction is critical because post-mint damage rarely adds value, while genuine mint-made errors can command impressive premiums. Auction results demonstrate that exceptional quality always matters. A typical worn 1964 D cent may still be worth only face value or slightly more because of its copper content. However, a pristine mint state example with full original red color, combined with a rare authenticated mint error, can attract intense bidding from advanced collectors. In today's competitive collector market, truly extraordinary certified examples have realized prices reaching tens of thousands of dollars, and unique error combinations may sell for even more when demand is especially strong. If you discover a 1964 D Lincoln cent with unusual features, resist the temptation to clean or alter it. Instead, compare it with reliable reference guides and consider submitting it to a respected third-party grading service for authentication. A professional evaluation is the best way to determine whether your coin is an ordinary circulation strike or a genuine collectible variety that deserves a place in a serious collection. Next up is the 1952 Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin from the final decade of the famous Wheat cent series and an interesting piece of American coinage history. The example we're looking at today is described as having a 1952 date, a D mint mark, an unusual date error, and a very dark, dirty black-colored appearance. At first glance, a coin in this condition might be easy to overlook, especially when its surface is covered with years of dirt and discoloration. But collectors know that unusual details around the date and mint mark deserve careful examination before deciding that an old Lincoln cent has little value. The Lincoln Wheat cent had already been in circulation for more than 4 decades when this coin was produced. The series began in 1909, when the United States introduced a new 1 cent design featuring Abraham Lincoln. The coin was created to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, and it became one of the most important designs in American numismatic history. Victor David Brenner created the portrait, giving the United States a circulating coin that honored an actual American president for the first time. By 1952, the Lincoln cent was a familiar part of everyday American life. Millions of Americans used these small copper coins for purchases, saved them in jars, or simply ignored them as they passed from one person to another. Few people could have imagined that decades later, collectors would carefully examine these same pennies for unusual varieties, errors, and surviving examples with exceptional characteristics. The obverse of the 1952 Lincoln cent features Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his portrait is the inscription, "In God We Trust," while Liberty appears to the left and the date is positioned below the portrait area. On this particular example, the D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. That small letter can be extremely important when studying Lincoln Wheat cents because different mint locations produce different quantities and varieties throughout the series. The reverse carries the familiar wheat cent design that collectors immediately recognize. 2 wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America, while the motto E pluribus unum appears above. This reverse design had remained in use since 1909 and would continue until 1958, when the wheat reverse was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design. Because of that long production period, the wheat cent has become one of the most collected American coin series. The 1952 issue is especially interesting because it was produced during a period when the United States was changing rapidly. America was moving through the post-World War II years. Manufacturing was expanding, and new technologies were becoming part of everyday life. Yet the humble Lincoln cent continued to carry the same classic design that had been introduced more than 40 years earlier. The Denver Mint produced a large number of Lincoln cents in 1952, meaning an ordinary 1952 D cent is not considered rare simply because of its age. However, collectors do not look only at mintage numbers. They also examine individual coins for die varieties, doubled details, repunched mint marks, unusual strikes, planchet problems, and other characteristics that may separate a normal example from a collectible error. That brings us to the most interesting part of this particular coin, the reported error involving the date. When collectors hear the words date error, they need to determine exactly what caused the unusual appearance. A damaged digit can look like a different number after decades of circulation. A scratch can cross a digit and make it appear doubled. Corrosion can remove part of a number. Even dirt trapped inside the recessed areas of the design can make the date look unusual. A genuine mint-made error is different. If a date feature was created during the manufacturing process, it can attract collector attention. Specialists may compare the date against known die characteristics and documented varieties. They may examine the shape of individual digits, the spacing between numbers, the surrounding fields, and the relationship between the date and mint mark. Magnification can sometimes reveal details that are almost impossible to see with the naked eye. The D mint mark is also worth examining carefully. On older Lincoln cents, mint marks can sometimes show unusual shapes or positioning because of the manufacturing methods used at the time. But collectors should not assume that every strange-looking D is a rare error. Wear, corrosion, scratches, and dirt can significantly change the appearance of a small mint mark. The black and dirty appearance of the coin adds another challenge. After more than 70 years, a circulated copper cent can develop dark brown, nearly black, or uneven surfaces. Storage conditions can cause additional discoloration, especially when coins are exposed to moisture, chemicals, soil, or other environmental conditions. While some collectors appreciate natural dark toning, heavy dirt or corrosion generally does not automatically increase value. In fact, a dirty coin can sometimes hide important evidence. The surfaces around the date may contain scratches or corrosion that make a normal digit appear unusual. Dirt can collect around the edges of letters and numbers, creating shadows that look like additional design elements. This is why professional collectors generally avoid making a final judgment based only on photographs or casual observation. For a coin described as having a 1952 date error, professional authentication would be particularly important. A grading service or experienced Lincoln cent specialist could determine whether the unusual feature is a recognized mint variety, a genuine striking or die error, or simply damage that occurred after the coin entered circulation. The distinction matters because the market value of these three possibilities can be completely different. An ordinary circulated 1952 D Lincoln cent may have only a modest collector value. A coin with heavy environmental damage may be worth even less. But a certified and genuinely rare mint error can attract a premium, especially if the error is dramatic, clearly visible, and difficult to find. Collectors are always interested in coins that tell a story about the minting process. A mistake created inside the mint can become a permanent record of something that happened during production. Unlike ordinary damage, a genuine mint error was created before the coin entered circulation. That gives it a special place in numismatics. The 1952 Lincoln cent also has another advantage. It belongs to the wheat cent series. Wheat cents are popular with collectors because they are old enough to have strong historical character while still being affordable in many grades. Millions of people who would never consider collecting modern coins become interested when they discover an old wheat cent in a family collection or inherited coin jar. The final years of the wheat cent series are particularly interesting because they connect two different periods of American history. The design was approaching the end of its 50-year run, yet the image of Lincoln remained as familiar as ever. In just a few years, the reverse would change permanently. That means the 1952 cent represents a mature stage of the original Lincoln wheat design. Collectors examining the obverse will look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat, and surrounding lettering. On heavily circulated examples, these details can become smooth and worn. On better preserved examples, the original design remains much sharper. The amount of wear can help determine the grade, although environmental damage can complicate the evaluation. The reverse is equally important. The wheat stalks are examined for remaining detail, while the central lettering is checked for wear, scratches, and unusual die characteristics. If the coin has dark or black surfaces, collectors may also look carefully for signs of cleaning or chemical treatment. Cleaning is especially important to discuss because many old pennies have been polished by their owners. Someone may think that making a dirty penny shiny will make it more valuable. Unfortunately, the opposite can happen. Harsh cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that experienced collectors immediately recognize. For this reason, the safest approach is to leave the coin exactly as it was found. If the dark color is natural, it may be part of the coin's history. If the dirt is hiding an unusual mint-made feature, cleaning could remove important evidence. Professional examination can be performed without aggressively altering the coin. Now, let's consider the market. A normal 1952 Lincoln cent is not a coin that should automatically be valued in the tens of thousands of dollars. The high values associated with famous Lincoln cent rarities usually come from extreme rarity, exceptional condition, major errors, or combinations of unusual characteristics. A dirty circulated coin needs a compelling reason to command a major premium. For the example described in this video, however, we are considering an exceptional scenario in which the reported date error is confirmed as a genuine and significant mint-made variety. If professional authentication establishes that the unusual date characteristic is a scarce error and the coin attracts serious specialist interest, a hypothetical high-end collector valuation could reach approximately $41,500. That figure should be understood as an exceptional collector market scenario, not the normal value of every 1952 Lincoln cent. The actual price of any individual coin would depend on authentication, the exact nature of the error, condition, surface quality, certification, and competition between bidders. The dark black appearance would not itself create a $41,500 value. The value would come from the combination of genuine rarity and collector demand. In fact, heavy environmental damage could reduce the value if it obscures the error or significantly harms the coin's surfaces. This is an important lesson for anyone searching through old pennies. A coin does not become valuable simply because it looks unusual. Collectors want to know why it looks unusual. Was the feature created by the mint? Was it created by circulation? Was it caused by corrosion? Was it deliberately altered? Those questions can determine whether the coin belongs in a serious collection or simply in a group of interesting old pennies. The 1952 Lincoln cent is therefore a perfect example of why careful examination matters. The date may appear strange, the mint mark may look unusual, and the dark surface may make the coin seem mysterious, but each feature needs to be studied separately before a final conclusion can be made. For collectors, the possibility of discovering a genuine error is part of the excitement. They search old rolls, inherited collections, flea market finds, estate boxes, and forgotten jars because they know that valuable varieties can sometimes be overlooked for years. Even when a coin turns out to be common, the process of identifying it teaches collectors more about American coinage. The history behind this 1952 cent also gives it a special appeal. Abraham Lincoln's portrait had already appeared on American cents for more than 40 years. Millions of these coins had passed through American hands. A small penny could have been carried by a factory worker, a shopkeeper, a student, or a family buying everyday necessities. That historical connection is part of what makes wheat cents so enjoyable to collect. When you hold a 1952 Lincoln cent, you're not simply holding a piece of copper. You're holding a small object that survived from a different era of American life. And if that coin contains a genuine mint-made error, it may also preserve evidence of something unusual that happened during its production. If you have a 1952 Lincoln wheat cent that appears to have an unusual date, take a close look before deciding that it is ordinary damage. Use magnification, compare the coin with reliable examples, and avoid cleaning the surface. Pay particular attention to the shapes and positions of the digits, the D mint mark, and any unusual lines or raised features around the date. Most importantly, remember that authentication comes before valuation. A professional opinion can determine whether the unusual feature is actually a recognized error. Without that confirmation, assigning a very high value to an unusual-looking coin can be misleading. With authentication, however, a genuine error can become much more interesting to collectors. The 1952 Lincoln wheat cent may not be one of the famous headline rarities simply because of its date, but a truly unusual and authenticated error could give an individual example a completely different story. That is the mystery collectors love. Two pennies can look almost identical at first glance, yet one may be ordinary while the other contains a small manufacturing mistake that makes it much more desirable. And that is why this dark, dirty 1952 Lincoln wheat cent deserves a closer look. Beneath the blackened surface and decades of wear may be nothing more than an old circulated penny. Or, if the reported date error is genuine, it could represent a fascinating piece of minting history that attracts serious collectors and potentially commands a much higher price at auction. Next up, we have another Lincoln wheat cent that often sparks curiosity among collectors, the 1918 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark. At first glance, many worn examples appear ordinary, but this issue has a fascinating history that keeps collectors searching through old coin collections. It's important to understand one key fact before looking at any potential treasure. A 1918 cent with an erased or damaged date is generally not valuable because of the damage itself. Coins become highly desirable when they are rare, die varieties, genuine mint errors, exceptional high-grade survivors, or historically important pieces that have been professionally authenticated. The year 1918 was one of the most significant years in American history. The United States was deeply involved in World War I, and the nation required enormous quantities of everyday coinage to support commerce. The Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln wheat cents during that year. These coins circulated heavily for decades, passing through countless hands before many eventually disappeared into jars, drawers, and family collections. Because these cents were used extensively, finding one today with sharp details is much more difficult than finding an example with heavy wear. Most surviving coins show years of circulation, flattened design elements, scratches, stains, or environmental damage. Collectors therefore pay substantial premiums only for coins that retain strong original detail, attractive surfaces, or recognized mint-made varieties. The Lincoln wheat cent itself is one of America's most iconic coin designs. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln appears on the obverse, making it the first regular United States circulating coin to feature the image of an actual historical figure. Above Lincoln is the national motto, "In God We Trust." The word liberty appears to the left of the portrait, while the date 1918 appears to the right. Since Philadelphia produced these cents, no mint mark is present below the date. The reverse displays the familiar wheat ears design. Two graceful wheat stalks frame the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America with E pluribus unum positioned across the top. This reverse remained in use until 1958 and has become one of the most recognizable designs in American numismatics. Collectors begin their examination by studying the date carefully. On heavily worn examples, the numbers may appear faint because decades of circulation gradually removed metal from the highest points of the design. Sometimes corrosion, cleaning, or accidental damage makes the date difficult to read. Unfortunately, if someone intentionally scratches, grinds, or alters the date after the coin leaves the mint, that is considered post-mint damage and usually lowers its collector value significantly. What truly excites specialists are genuine mint-made varieties. These include dramatic die cracks, retained cuds, die breaks, struck-through errors, broad strikes, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, lamination errors, and other production mistakes that occurred during the minting process. Because these errors originated inside the mint, collectors recognize them as legitimate varieties rather than damage. Professional authentication is essential whenever a coin appears unusual. Experts examine weight, diameter, metal composition, strike characteristics, microscopic die markers, and surface quality before determining whether the coin represents a genuine mint error or simply damage accumulated after entering circulation. Certification provides buyers with confidence and often increases marketability. Condition remains one of the most important factors affecting value. On low-grade examples, Lincoln's hair, cheek, ear, and jawline become smooth from years of wear. The wheat ears on the reverse also lose their individual grain lines. Better preserved coins retain sharper details, stronger rims, and more attractive surfaces, making them significantly more desirable. Surface originality is another major consideration. Many old cents have been cleaned, polished, or chemically treated in an attempt to improve their appearance. Experienced collectors generally prefer coins with natural surfaces and original color, even if those coins display honest circulation wear. Originality is highly respected in the numismatic community. Color classifications also influence desirability. Copper coins are typically designated as red, red-brown, or brown. Since most 1918 Lincoln cents circulated extensively, fully red examples are extremely scarce and command strong premiums in the marketplace. Brown examples remain collectible, especially when they display attractive, even toning without significant corrosion or damage. Market demand for early Lincoln wheat cents has remained strong for decades because collectors enjoy assembling complete date and mint collections. Every year, new hobbyists begin searching for key dates, better condition examples, and certified varieties.
This steady demand helps maintain interest in attractive early wheat cents, particularly those with exceptional eye appeal. Auction results clearly show that rarity, preservation, and authentication drive value. An ordinary circulated 1918 Philadelphia wheat cent typically sells for a modest amount. However, certified mint state examples with exceptional luster, outstanding strike quality, or recognized mint errors can realize dramatically higher prices. The most extraordinary pieces, those with remarkable preservation, famous provenance, or major authenticated errors, can attract intense bidding among advanced collectors and investors. One reason collectors continue searching is the possibility of discovering an overlooked variety. Careful examination under magnification may reveal interesting die cracks, repunched details, or other documented characteristics that distinguish one coin from millions of others. Although such discoveries are uncommon, they are part of what makes coin collecting so exciting. Storage also plays an important role in preserving value. Copper reacts easily with moisture, fingerprints, and harsh environments. Coins kept in proper archival holders generally survive in much better condition than those stored loose in containers where they rub against other coins. Even small differences in preservation can have a significant effect on collector interest. Patience and careful research are essential for anyone hoping to uncover valuable Lincoln cents. Rather than assuming every unusual-looking coin is rare, experienced collectors compare their finds with published references, study verified varieties, and seek professional authentication whenever necessary. This disciplined approach prevents costly mistakes and helps identify coins with genuine numismatic significance. The 1918 Lincoln wheat cent. Without a mint mark continues to be admired because it connects collectors with an important chapter of American history. Every surviving example has traveled through more than a century of commerce, witnessing generations of change. While erased dates, heavy damage, or post-mint alterations rarely create value, authentic mint errors, exceptional condition, and certified rarity can transform an ordinary-looking cent into a highly sought-after collectible. That is why experienced collectors never judge a coin solely by its appearance. They study the strike, surfaces, originality, and documented varieties before reaching any conclusions. With knowledge, patience, and careful examination, even a simple Lincoln wheat cent can become the beginning of an exciting collecting journey, reminding us that history often survives in the smallest pieces of everyday change. Next up is the 1936 Abraham Lincoln wheat 1 cent, a classic early Lincoln cent that has remained popular with collectors for generations. The example we're looking at today has a 1936 date, no visible mint mark, a large-looking date, and a very dirty, aged appearance. At first glance, this coin may seem like an ordinary circulated penny that has simply spent many decades exposed to dirt and rough storage. But when an old wheat cent shows an unusual date or other distinctive characteristics, collectors know that a closer examination can sometimes reveal details that are not immediately obvious. The 1936 Lincoln cent was produced during an important period in American history. The United States was still recovering from the Great Depression, and millions of Americans were dealing with economic hardship. At the same time, the country was beginning to experience gradual industrial and economic changes that would eventually lead into the dramatic events of the following decade. The Lincoln cent continued circulating throughout this period, becoming a familiar part of everyday American life. The Lincoln wheat cent itself had been introduced more than 25 years earlier, in 1909. Victor David Brenner created the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln that appeared on the obverse. The design was introduced to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and became a landmark in United States coinage. Lincoln's portrait was a major departure from the symbolic liberty figures that had appeared on many earlier American coins. On the obverse of the 1936 cent, Lincoln faces toward the right. The words, "In God We Trust," appear above his portrait, while liberty is placed to the left, and the date 1936 appears below. Because this example has no visible mint mark, it would normally represent a Philadelphia Mint issue. Philadelphia cents traditionally carried no mint mark, so the absence of a mint mark is normal and does not automatically indicate a rare error. The reverse displays the famous wheat design. Two wheat stalks curve along the left and right sides of the coin, framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Above the central design is the motto, E pluribus unum. This reverse had already become extremely familiar to Americans by 1936 and would remain on the Lincoln cent for more